Welcome back to the pizzeria. I've changed seats this week. I didn't think my analysis of Steve Clarke's performance was that bad, but listen, these boys in the background, they get paid the big bucks to make these decisions. So Innes here in the host seat, joined by Ethan and Goggsy. How you doing today, Ethan? You all right?
I was doing well until Saturday. Innes, thanks for having me.
And Goggsy yourself?
I'm all right. Wasn't at the game on Saturday either, thankfully, but I sat and watched it from the comfort of my own bed.
Well, it was a jam-packed weekend in the Scottish Premiership. Celtic returned to top of the league. Aberdeen still flying. The Hibs got their season started, and there was a VAR controversy in a jam-packed game at Sammon Park, and Ross County also got their first game of the season as well. Rangers on the Sunday bounced back from their old firm woes for a result against Dundee United. We'll go through the results first and foremost. Ethan, you were up at Ross County's ground on Saturday, I believe. Do you want to give a round-up of that game?
Yeah, gladly. My first note was it was very reminiscent for me of the Dundee derby last August. In terms of Dundee's performance, the start was awful, terrible. Didn't get a sniff towards the Ross County goal. I think that kind of lingered throughout the full 90, to be fair. But similarly to the derby, the substitutes were eventually made. The right substitutes, the right changes to make. It got the team performing much smoother, much more direct, but ultimately this time there was no comeback to behold, unlike that game in August. I wrote a piece earlier where I just said that Ross Laidlaw could have put a hammock in the goal mouth and had a nap, and he still would have woke up with a clean sheet. Dundee's big issue for me right now is, in the last two games anyway, a serious lack of creativity.
Is that most obviously because Luke McCowan isn't in the midfield anymore?
I think so. I don't think there's an immediate replacement for McCowan. If you do look to the likes of Josh Mulligan, who could very well fit that mould very well, he was one of the few positives for Dundee on Saturday. It's not going to be instantaneous. It's going to need a bit of time to gel. Same with the boy Sammy Braybrook on loan from Leicester. Clearly has talent, but you can't expect him just to hit the ground running with that kind of expectation level on. He's before Dundee, Sammy's only had one senior appearance. So yeah, it's a bit alarming because I felt against St Mirren, we only tested the goalkeeper 3 times. Twice were goals, another one was straight down his throat, and then we'll go to Dingwall, and we've not tested Laidlaw at all. So I just kind of feel that I don't want this to be a reoccurring issue. The next reoccurring issue, of course, is that we're terrible at leaking cheap goals at the back. About 10 minutes in, it looks so basic if you watch it through. It's a corner swung at the back post. I don't even think the boys had to move to header it. It's a keel right for Ross County. It's just like the ball bounces off his forehead and goes in. It's completely effortless. But listen, Ross County on the day were sharp, organised, everything that Dundee weren't. So they're fully, credit to them. They merited the win. Absolutely, I can't take that away from them. But I am very disappointed by the display from Dundee. First defeat of the season, done well to be unbeaten going into the international break. But now we're sobered up, crashed back down to earth. And what a better way to look next than a League Cup quarter-final away to Rangers. So,
See, in terms of the patterns of play, Ethan, did you notice the team were playing any different to when you had Luke McCowan in the side, or was it just a case of just not being up for it?
I just don't think Dundee were particularly sharp. They were very flat. In terms of the style of play, I think in most transitions and phases it was similar. The difference when you have a player like McCowan is he can cover so much space. He can come in deep into pockets of space and, of course, release those kind of killer passes, get movement flowing. And they kind of lacked that link-up man, I felt. Josh Mulligan, as I say, was a positive in the game. Eventually got subbed off for get your lips around this name. Oluwaseun Adewume on loan from Burnley, Austrian midfielder. He looked great when he came on. Very positive, very eager to get on the ball, and everything he touched just seemed to be a little bit of laced with a little bit of gold, but just nothing really to get some end product on the end of it. He had one great delivery for Simon Murray, and he was just shy of reaching at the back post. So no, there's certain aspects you look at Dundee where there's still positives to be had, but that overall display, it was torture to watch, and I'm sure we'll touch on it later as well. There was a referee call, Simon Murray penalty incident where Willie Collum, the head of refereeing operations, has actually phoned Tony Docherty to apologise over it not being given, and it could have changed the dynamic of the game. But listen, if we're just going to review this purely based on performance, I don't think Dundee deserved anything on that showing.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go over the VAR decisions across the boards shortly, but I just wanted to get a gauge of what the mood in the fan base was like after the game, because it's obviously been a great start to the season. These were developing a bit of a rivalry with Hibs from what I've seen from the Twitter spats. Great point at Easter Roads. There's a feel-good factor. Is there a feeling here that after that transfer window, it could be the start of, a not too great a run?
I wouldn't say that there's any sense of dread, except the fact that the next game is Ibrox. It could very well turn out that way, because, I mean, when you slip into one defeat, you can find yourself on a slippery slope. I mean, right now it's the first defeat this season. Next it's Rangers. The next is home to Aberdeen, and Aberdeen's side that have won all their games. So very soon we could be looking at the barrel with 3 consecutive defeats, which obviously can derail confidence and morale. We're not quite there yet, and hopefully that won't be the case. But I think there is certainly a small sense of, all right, well, there's got to be an answer for life after Luke McCowan, and we're just not seeing it yet, or at least we're not seeing it in the positive sense yet. I think the manager has also said about he's not done in the recruitment front. There's still free agents he's looking to bring in. The stories going around is that we've made an offer for Scott Fraser, and that seems to be, although the deal not quite dead, it's maybe looking unlikely. It's certainly taking its time. You maybe think that a result like that could maybe wake the manager up and think, all right, okay, we're maybe going to need someone in the door sooner than later as a result of that. Because I think, again, with all respect due to Ross County, those are one of the games in the league that we would look at and say, if we're going to win any game away from home, that's going to be one of the most likely. And we've went there and we've not even taken a point. So I think a lesson in that regard of bringing someone in or having a more immediate reply to McCowan's departure, I think that's got to be learnt as quickly as possible before we're made to suffer much longer.
Well, you alluded to it earlier on, great performance for Ross County, first win in the season. What did they do right in the game?
Well, pretty much everything, really. Everything. I mean, you look at it at face value. They've won 2-0, which is a comfortable scoreline. They've kept a clean sheet. Dundee have scored the most goals in Scottish football this season. I think the number is still 33. Scoring goals for fun, scoring at least 2 goals per game, and Ross County shut us up entirely. Now, yeah, I've been saying that we're quite flat, but truth be told, part of that is because Ross County were outstanding defensively. It's easy to criticise attackers when they can't get beyond defenders, but sometimes you have to look up and say, well, look, boys like, and again, we'll touch on this later on, I think, but boys like Ryan Leake, for example, he came on, he wasn't even meant to start. Yeah, he didn't start. He was subbed on in the 15th minute due to an injury to George Harmon, and I thought he was outstanding. I thought, I might get his name wrong here, without seeing it read, but the guy that got Ross County's man of the match, another centre-half, Lakapata, again, excellent, outstanding. They were just a solid shape defensively, and it's the old cliche. They were up for it every ball in the air. I mean, there were some complaints that it was a windy day and elements were against us. I've seen that said a few times. Elements are same for both sides. It fell it, and Ross County played it into their hands. They were much more suited to the field than Dundee were. So. No, there's a lot to like about Ross County, especially Don Cowie's Ross County.
They certainly make it a tough place to go, and the elements plays a part in that, but they play to their strengths as well. I'll commend your attempt at the names. I know we were just slagging the likes of Chris Boyd, who didn't do their homework on the team sheets, but also done well there, Ethan. And if Simon Murray, if that goal goes in and he's not offside, perhaps it's a different game. And maybe Simon Murray, maybe he's the man to drag you out of a potential start to a dip in form. Goggsy, not too great an afternoon for yourself. Aberdeen still flying, 5 wins out of 5. How good were they on Saturday?
I don't think they were as good as the media has billed them to be, and that might be a bit of a controversial opinion, but I think that was mainly
especially coming from a Motherwell fan who just been beat 2-1. But
yeah, but credit to them, they got the result they needed, but I think it was mainly down to us being as bad as we were in the first half that sort of gave Aberdeen the platform to build on for the second. You're against a team that's top of the league. You want to get in their faces, and all we did was let them have the ball for the first half hour, and that's where they got in front. And you go up to Aberdeen, you're expecting probably a point's probably a good result for you. I mean, considering the stature of us. But in my opinion, our setup was wrong. I mean, we've come off the back of 3 wins in a row, and we didn't attack. I mean, it's been a regular thing where we've just sat and seen the first 15, 20 minutes, see how it goes, and then start playing football. But that didn't happen until the second half, in my opinion. And I think that's criminal at any level, because like you're basically giving your opponent a free first half to have a go at you, and we paid for it. I mean, it was 1-0 potentially going on 2 or 3. We didn't even test Mitov until the second half. So
You had an outstanding game, by the way.
Yeah, he did, but we didn't test him enough, and that's our problem. I mean, like, you can always say how good a goalkeepers played, but we didn't test him enough. We didn't have enough attempts on target, and like in the first half, we were really poor. And I hate the fact that Kettlewell's come in and started talking about a 25-second period that like, oh, we should have done better, or we should have like got something from it. But in my opinion, we didn't deserve a point from the game. We didn't deserve anything. And fair play to Aberdeen for continuing their 10-win streak.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to call that out as well, though, if the game's finished early. That was a bit bizarre.
Like, you've got 95 minutes to win the game of football. If you're worried about 25 seconds, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, but I think he was right to question the officials. But I get what you're saying. You're a Motherwell fan. You want to hear an honest take on the game, and it wasn't good.
I'm a realist at the best of times, and if someone's trying to complain about a shortage in time when you've got the same amount of time as the other team, then like it's down to it's your fault for having to complain about that, in my opinion.
Well, what were they doing right? Where are they getting this media hype from? Because it's 5 wins in 5. They've obviously got quality in Papagay, who's just had an absolute stormer to start this season. Is it just been a case of flashes of quality from certain players, or are you seeing something in their play that is putting them a cut above the rest at the moment? Well,
the first thing I would say is they're not putting a foot wrong. And I mean, football's a game of mistakes, and they took advantage of the mistakes we made. For example, Davor Stravkovsky, who was already on a booking, decided not to challenge Papagay, and that was the start of the move that got him the first goal. Like, if he goes and like, I know he's worried about being sent off, but if you're making that tackle and not shitting out of it, then like we're denying Aberdeen an opportunity to go for it. Yes, they probably would end up winning the game anyway because we'd have 10 men. But if you're just diving out of a tackle because you're worried about your own performance, then I think that's a bit of a silly decision, because we've got another 60 minutes or so before the game's done, but the fact that he's shirked the tackle and allowed Papagay to just run past him, and he's a powerful player, so he's got to run past anyone really, and I mean, goes and scores a fantastic goal, but that's down to us losing the ball in a key area, and we're paid for it.
What do you make of Aberdeen, Ethan? Do you think they're going to challenge, perhaps even to split the Old Firm this season?
It's still very early days. I feel like I've seen this story with Aberdeen before. A few years ago under Derek McInnes, they looked like they were going to take Celtic all the way, and then there was just a spontaneous collapse. I don't know enough about the Aberdeen team, but obviously what I've seen so far, I like. I like the approach that they've taken with the new manager. I like the manager's attacking philosophy. I think the signings he brought in are some very good players. Particularly, again, some names go beyond me. They've got that Croatian midfielder that used to be at Manchester City, handpicked by Mikel Arteta personally at the time. He looks great. I think he's got a bit of an issue with his fitness record, but then there's also the Norwegian midfielder, Nielsen. There's some Aberdeen fans already describing him as a Rolls Royce. He's 32 years old on a 3-year contract. So, there's an old saying there that age doesn't really define you. It's only when you see signs of them slowing down. And in this case, they've got this 32-year-old gem in midfield that just seems to break up everything. And of course, you mentioned Papagay scoring the brace as well. He signed, I think, for a big fee last season.
$500,000.
500 grand it was, yeah.
And we didn't really see anything of him. You can maybe say, right, that's because Miovski was the man leading the line. But they've made a lot of money from the Miovski sale, and they've already got the replacement sitting there at the front door. I think he's the league's top goal scorer so far. He's having a real redemption arc, because I don't think Aberdeen fans particularly took to him from what they did see of him until now, under the new manager, up and firing. So, and Mitov as well, another excellent signing for them. Big fan of him when he was at St Johnstone. So, I think they'll do well. I think, for me, they're favourites to certainly finish third. At the rate Rangers are going as well, they could very well maybe challenge Rangers for that second place spot. But to go any further, I couldn't see it.
I think Rangers will be far too strong, personally. It's been a bit of a sugary peg to start, but I think there's the expectations on Clermont, I think, will start to simmer down a little bit as we see the clear difference between Celtic and Rangers. I mean, Celtic are cut above. We've seen that from the game last week, but I still think there's far too much quality in that Rangers squad to have a serious challenge from Aberdeen. What do you think, Goggsy?
Well, I think if you look at it this way, Rangers have European football until after Christmas, and yes, they're still grinding out results, and they're notorious for their injury problems. Aberdeen don't have European football, and they also have a consistency right now. I mean, the fixtures have been kind to them because they've got the sort of teams that they should be beating on paper anyway at the start of the season, and that's building momentum because, well, they've got 10 wins competitively in a row without even drawing. So I think there is potential there to go on until Christmas and still be in the top two, and we'll see what happens. But I mean, they're not putting a foot wrong at the moment, and I think that's the main thing. You see a lot of teams over the last few years, Hearts have had stellar runs into October where they think they've won the league, or Kilmarnock under Steve Clarke. But the thing is, Aberdeen have, in my opinion, a better squad, and also they've got nothing to sort of take their eye off the ball. So I think they'll challenge Rangers for second, but I don't see them being everlasting in that sort of place. I think third is nailed on, and I think they'll be very good for it.
Well, let's go to Rangers then, shall we, on the Sunday midday kickoff. Did you watch the game, Ethan?
No, I didn't. I've only got the highlights for that one.
Right, okay. Goggsy?
Yeah, I had an eye on it while I was working behind the bar, so yeah.
Strong performance, bit of a class act from Tom Lawrence in the first half was the difference, but all in all, pretty solid showing from Rangers.
Yeah, well, they got the job done, didn't they? And they've kept the clean sheet at a venue that is, again, I know it's not easy to win over there of anyone, but with Rangers specifically, I believe it was a sold out crowd. They've had it rough, say sugary peg start the season. Massive defeat at Celtic, a very intimidating venue over at Parkhead. Now to another one at Tannadice. So they had to expel some demons. They had to get the momentum on both ends, and that's what they've done. As I say, that bit of brilliance from Lawrence being the difference so early on. Good teams need to find different ways to win, and holding on to a lead for the majority of the game, I think, has to draw out different kinds of attributes to what you would normally expect from a Rangers side. A typical Rangers Celtic side can go to a place like that and maybe win comfortably 3 or 4 goals. But in this case, it's probably, as weird as it will sound, it's arguably a better showing that they can prove they can win that way as well, with what you would call the dangerous scoreline, overseeing a longer period of time. Because United had chances to equalise. I think they came the closest with Trapanovsky, but Rangers managed to weather the storms in those elements. And as I say, it's a very positive result, and it's one they desperately needed.
And Goggsy, Celtic win comfortably again at Celtic Park. How would you predict the lead? Do you think Rangers have a chance?
No.
Genuinely? No?
No, absolutely not. I think Celtic are far too strong because Rangers have too many demons, and they can never get over them enough. In the last few years, I don't think
it's the poison chalice.
Yeah, and I think it's only a matter of time before Clermont's deemed as not good enough.
Which seems crazy because this time last year, the guy's come in. Well, maybe not this time last year, a wee bit later. He's come in. He's looked amazing. You know, they were on for a quadruple. Everyone was liking his ideas of the way he's talking now. And the fans now seem to be on his back. It seems to be self-inflicted implosion for me.
I think it's just a Rangers thing. And I think...
controversial statement, that.
I'm just saying it as
all fans are partial to a meltdown. Come on, that's unfair.
No, but you see meltdowns happen all the time. But the thing is, Rangers have that bit about them where they believe that they are better than they have been. And
yeah, but to call it Rangers thing's unfair. You look at Celtic during the COVID year when they just won a treble, and the fans were still getting on Neil Lennon's back. I think it's probably a Scottish football fan thing.
Well, yeah. But if that's how you want to say it, then go for it.
No reply.
No reply.
I would suggest
I've already built myself a grave, all right?
I would suggest you go and watch like the fan channels in England. You see it all the time. AFTV obviously kind of started the whole thing off. The fans lose one game and they completely lose their head. I wouldn't say it's particular to one team. I think it just comes with some clubs and they have heavy expectations. But when you talk about Rangers from the year before, to my mind, and again, this might be controversial, I think a lot of that comes to do with the hype from the media. Whilst things did go off to a positive start, I feel like that we've seen that story before as well. I think I remember when Michael Beale first came in, he was the best thing since sliced bread. Rangers looked like they're going back to top gear. They're going to challenge, and of course it fell spectacularly on its face. And now what you see when the fans are angry and disappointed with these results, with the way they're playing, suddenly they're pointing the finger at, let's say, players like Tavernier and saying that they've been problematic for years. So you go from, up here where everything's going great, and then suddenly there's that small shift, and it's we've been having problems for a long extended period of time. So hang on a second. It feels rinse repeat. It does feel very rinse repeat, and it's one of those things that if like I say, right now Tavernier seems to be the main kind of scapegoat. If Rangers go on and win another 4 games in a row, suddenly that goes back under the rug until the next defeat.
Until they draw against St Mirren.
With my view, I think with Clermont, for any team, when you look to win a league, a team can have a title-winning formula. Traditionally, I would say the first thing is you look at the spine. A goalkeeper that can save you that kind of 10 to 15 point mark, a holding midfielder that is up there with the best in the league, and then your source of goals up top, 20 plus goals with either by one individual or through a set. And whilst Rangers maybe have some of that incrementally, maybe not just enough quality surrounding it. In Scottish football, you probably now have to compare it to your rivals. How many Rangers players get in the Celtic team? Last season, I would have said 2. I would have said Jack Butland and James Tavernier. Now that I look at it, this season, I'd say none. Yeah, I think the gap has actually gotten bigger between the two.
I mean, I think for me, it stems back to sacking Gio. I can't believe they sacked him.
Completely agree.
To get them to a European final, almost won it if it wasn't for Raj Ramsey to palm the ball to the keeper. But I thought that was a crazy decision. I think that was the start of the spiral of them trying to cut corners and try and chase success. It's never easy. You need to build it. You've seen that Hibs, who have spent a lot of money. The Gordon family came in and they've tried to buy success quickly, but it's not as easy as that. You need the right manager in place. You need to give that manager time. You need to bring in the right players, and it seems to be a recurring theme for Rangers over the past couple of seasons where they're just trying to buy it and cut corners, but don't seem to be paying off. But speaking of that game at Celtic Park, though, another storyline that goes along with that was Hearts, who sit bottom of the league. How much trouble are they in, Goggsy?
I think they'll be fine. I think they just need to find a winning formula, because I think I've said on a previous podcast, they've signed a lot of players of the same sort of standard, and they've got too many players that's like to sort of try and fit in, and they've got one missing piece, and they've not signed enough players that would improve the starting 11. All they've added is depth, and yeah, it's great signing all the best players from the teams below you, but when they need to step up to a higher standard that they expect at Hearts, I think that's where they falter.
Fair. What do you think, Ethan? Do you think they're in trouble, or?
As it stands, they're in trouble. I believe Hearts fans were singing "You're getting sacked on your birthday" to Stephen Naismith on the weekend.
I mean, they are bad as well. We've talked about Rangers; they are so bad. The Gorgie mob, like.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with that. But when I look at Hearts last season, I didn't see. They always finish third place, but when I watched them, I didn't look at it and think, wow, that's the third best team in Scotland. Then I look at the recruitment over the summer, and there's some great signings. I thought, wow, yeah, do you know what? That squad on paper, that looks excellent. And of course, it just completely stagnated. Guys like Spittle, Yandanda, Malachi Boateng, I thought were all excellent additions. They get James Penrice as well, I think.
Yes.
From Livingston, yeah, another excellent addition. Although it looks like he's not had the best of starts with Hearts. Yeah, no, they're definitely in trouble right now. And the main thing I think you have to note is obviously you've got a striker that scored about 30 goals last season, and now he's goalless in the first few games. It's very much possibly the case that their form coincides with the star player. Once they can get Shanklin up and running, his confidence up and scoring goals, that's maybe where you'll see the form turn around as well. And that's nothing new. I think there's plenty of teams in the past where you just need your star players to be up and on it. The confidence thing, you light one spark, and suddenly all the fireworks will go off all at once.
Yeah, it seems to be too much quality in that squad to talk about a relegation battle or anything, although it has happened before.
Twice.
Twice, of course. But is it a case, Goggsy, of Shanklin's not firing, so Hearts aren't firing, and it's perhaps someone that's maybe going on a mood because he's not got a move in somewhere?
Well, I don't know about that because he says he's happy, like his family's happy in Edinburgh, etc. But the thing is, nobody's too good to go down. Like, as we've already discussed, like Hearts have been relegated twice in recent memory, and like I think if Shanklin gets that first goal and it's on a good day when he gets maybe a couple, that's where his confidence will start backing up again. But got to remember they've got European football around the corner, and like they can't afford to play really badly in that because the Scottish coefficient is on the line here because of past performance in the last couple of seasons. But I do think if they manage to get Spittle playing a wee bit higher up the park in the same sort of role that he did at Motherwell, because he had a sort of free role at Motherwell, but then again we sort of gave him that platform to do that. Whereas Hearts are so set in their ways that they expect him to sort of play in a sort of role that is too deep. And that's where he's sort of stuck there, so he can't really get out and play the same sort of standard that he did at Motherwell. Whereas Danda, I don't think works in the same sort of start 11 as Blair Spittle because they're both really creative players. And either one of them's got to go back and sort of do the dirty work, whereas I don't think either of them want to do that. I think they've got to either play Danda or Spittle. They can't play them in the same formation.
Perhaps Cammy Devlin isn't doing enough in the middle of the park either. I have spoken to a couple of Hearts fans who said Shanklin did start off quite slow last season as well and really kicked into second gear come the second half of the season.
The thing to look out for them now is, and I can say this, I agree Goggsy completely. You're never too good to not go down. We had a team a few years ago that looked great on paper. It was just shit on grass. You had Lee Griffiths and Jason Cummings up front, Charlie Adam pulling strings in midfield. We were thinking, fucking hell, we might have a chance of top six, maybe even Europe. This fucking team looks great. And then obviously it just didn't happen. And what you notice is the two elements that fall in play is that the longer that your form kind of stays there in the depth, you then begin to notice performance-wise, there's a lot of players that struggle to do the basics correct, and you leak a lot of cheap goals that obviously prove to be very costly. And that's going to be the main thing to watch out for Hearts now going forward is does the standard of performance drop? Because sometimes, you can play well and not win games. That's the nature of football sometimes. But if you begin to see the actual quality drop, that's when the first alarm bells will start ringing. And that's maybe they'll begin to look at Naismith and say, right, I'm not against experienced managers. I think they can bring fresh ideas. But sometimes when the boat's getting rocked, they might think, well, we're going to need steadier hands to steady the ship again. The next element is silly as it may sound, it's luck. When you're in the relegation battle and you're the team that goes down, you tend to have absolutely no luck going for you. The moment I kind of confessed to myself that Dundee were in a relegation fight with that team, we got beat 1-0 off Hibs, and it was the most miraculous own goal we've ever seen. Across in the area, and Paul McMullen's done a diving header from like 20 yards to clear it, and he's put it in the top corner. It's things like that when they start go against you. And other campaigns, missing penalties and vital points, like Kenny Miller missed one in the 97th minute. Those are moments where you pick up and think that's going to prove to be crucial later on, and the lucks went completely against you. And from what I've seen from Hearts so far, I thought the goal they conceded against United was unlucky in the defeat at Tynecastle. Surely in the nature that it's a deflected strike from the centre half that's decided the game. I think they're unlucky in that regard. I think other fans will tell you that maybe overall with the performance that it didn't merit the result. But no, from my experience, having seen it firsthand, those are the two things you've got to look out for.
And now the other side of the capital city, Hibs got their campaign up and running finally. I was there at the game. It was a solid performance from Hibs. Started well, ended the half not as well. It was a 15 minutes where it wasn't looking too great. Actually, they were sort of being a bit passive in the game. And then the big Ukrainian striker, bundles it in the net at the stroke of half time. And then Hibs really got into their stride in the second half and ended up being quite a comfortable afternoon for them. They'll hope that they can press on and really build from that performance. I think they've been unlucky a couple of times against Killie, that late equaliser. Dundee, a lot of fans felt that they were fairly comfortable, and then they brought in the third centre half, which then invited on pressure from Dundee, and Dundee ended up getting a brilliant point. But Hibs fans will be hoping that they can build on that performance and really kick on. I'm interested to hear from you guys, because there's been a lot of talk in the last few years about how Aberdeen and Hearts are challenging for third, and it's sort of a give in between them two. But if you ask any Hibs fan, they really see themselves as big a club as both Aberdeen and Hearts. But through poor decisions on who to take charge of the team in the dugout, is really not happened for them. How do you guys see Hibs, both in stature as a club and their chances going forward? Do you think with the right man in the dugout, perhaps it is David Gray, they could really kick on and be on that pedestal of challenging for third like they were under Jack Ross? Goggsy, we'll go to you.
I don't think so. Like I was actually quite pleased with David Gray being hired, because how many times in the league in the last few years have you seen them opt to get someone who's already part of the backroom staff of field managers going on to be hired? For example, Motherwell had Maurice Malpass come in, who was under Terry Butcher, who did a really good job, and then we faltered and we struggled and just stayed up and no more. And then you've got other player again with Motherwell. Stevie Hamill came in with a lack of experience, and we were struggling for weeks and months on end. And then, like with Hibs, David Gray's only just got his first win. Granted, like they've had a couple of really difficult fixtures, but I do think that I don't think he's the man. But then again, how many managers have they had this century? Let alone like put
it this way. I'm 28, and there's been 28 managers since I've been alive. That's a manager season.
I think he'll do a good enough job to maybe get them like 8th or 7th. But I don't see them being a top 6 performing side. And I think no matter how much money you throw at the club, I mean, I don't know, like it was £6 million that's been pumped in this year, and I don't think they've got a squad that's good enough for the top 6.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a bit of a standoff in the boardroom. We don't know the details, but we don't actually know how much of access Hibs has to those funds. It has been transferred over, but we've had no transfers from our partnership with Bournemouth. We've not really made signings which would suggest that the budget's had an increase. It's a bit of an interesting one that to see how much has actually been invested. But we did try and pay out for Luke McCowan. Obviously, Celtic came in, and when they come knocking, it's a foregone conclusion. Ethan, you've had your spats with Hibs fans on Twitter in the past. How do you see their chances? Do you think Dundee will finish above Hibs this season? Do you think they'll get top 6, or do you agree with Goggsy? Do you think they'll still be a bottom 6 club this end of the season?
I've not seen anything from this current setup, this current team, suggest that they'll be in the top 6. I think the top 6 demands a level of consistency, and we're only just talking about Hibs' first win of the season. We need to see more from Hibs. I think, again, there's been some positive signings. I like a big fan of Dwight Gill. I know he might be deemed as a bit of a panic signing with Kieran Bowie getting injured on international break, but I think he's a striker of really good pedigree. I think he'll score lots of goals up here. I'm a big fan of the Ukrainian striker that was at Hibs previously. And Kwon, I think Kwon's an excellent signing in addition to Hibs as well. I've no doubt David Gray has some ideas on how to merge the right team going forward, and because the recruitment shows that he's got the eye for the player. I think Kieran Bowie as well, an excellent investment. Just unfortunate he's got that injury. Listen, Hibs have the stature of the size of club that should be competing with Aberdeen and Hearts up in those places, the best of the rest, so to speak. But club size and resources don't always necessarily equal the desired result. There's plenty of clubs you can point at all over football that underperform in various levels. And we've seen that with Hibs. I mean, you touched on the sliding doors moment at Rangers being Van Bronckhorst, which I agree with, and I can have a whole rant about that at another point. But for me, Hibs, it's not such a dissimilar story. I felt when they were under Jack Ross, finishing third place, they had a cracking record. I think was it away from home specifically as well. They got into the League Cup final. Okay, the league form was a bit shaky. Then they sacked him before the final, and I think that's maybe the moment you can look at and say, well, that's where things never quite recovered, because they bring in these new managers, and I think I've said before that you'd rather be, you've got better job security as the Prime Minister than you do as Hibs manager.
Well, that's actually debatable, to be fair, the last few years we've seen. But no, I'd completely agree with you, Ethan. It's very similar to the story of Rangers. Is never quite recovered from that moment. There's been a lot of trying to cut corners, and, as you've said, Goggsy, it doesn't necessarily buy you success unless you are spending the levels that Celtic and Rangers are. Because you can be conned at any level. You can buy Dylan Venti for 700 grand and it doesn't work out, and that's a lot of money for a club outside the Old Firm in this league. It's coming back to the Dundee game, Ethan. We'll speak about the VAR decisions at the weekend. What did you make of the penalty shout against Ross County? Do you think that was a penalty or?
Well, obviously, I mentioned earlier that Colin apologised. He felt it should have been a penalty. I look at it and I would agree. I felt it was a penalty at the time. At first glance, I'll admit I wasn't entirely convinced. I had a feeling that, the defender's on the deck and Murray's maybe just ran into him, maybe looking for it. And then you saw his reaction. He was furious. And then we saw the replay and I had a second look. And again, don't want to pick names in case I get the wrong one, but I want to say it was maybe James Brown. Whoever it was, he's actually lunged out his leg at the last second to catch Murray. And I think, well, because he's actually moved out his way to then catch the forward who's going for the ball, yeah, I think it's a foul. I think it's a penalty. He stopped the forward from advancing forward to getting the ball, potential shot on goal. I think it should have been awarded, and I'm quite flabbergasted as to how I can tell that from one replay from the sidelines. Meanwhile, the paid professionals at the monitors whose job are to pick these things up, it completely goes by them. I'm astonished. I can't understand how that can be, that could be able to happen. But
I've only seen one angle, and it looks like he kind of pulls him down from the back, to be fair. I mean, if that was the only angle they've seen on VAR, I can maybe understand it. But, you're saying from a second look, it doesn't look as clear-cut as that.
Well, if we're about the Simon Murray one, where he's...
the penalty the Ross County were given,
the penalty Ross County got was a penalty. Yeah, I knew that at the time. When Jordan White went down, I saw the shot get pulled. And I thought, all right, that's going to get reviewed, and we're in trouble. We go into halftime 1-0. I think it's a completely different story, at least in terms of what. That's what Doherty said as well. In terms of what we can change, because let's say 1-0 can be a dangerous scoreline. Giving them that cushion, it was essentially just the biggest shot in the foot. Ingram, I don't know what he's trying to play at here, because to begin with, his hands are grasped to his shoulders. He's grappling the forward to go up in the air. I don't think that it's an off the ball incident as well. I don't think the ball's particularly near them at this point where he's coming down, and he's decided to keep a hold of his shirt. So you can, in my eyes, it's definitely a penalty because you can award it for two separate offences. The offence of the grappling and perhaps obstructing White, and secondly, holding his shirt as he goes down. And I think White was intelligent in going down from the shirt pull to kind of emphasise the nature of the challenge. Yeah, no, so... From both VAR calls, I think the first one, giving Ross County the penalty, absolutely correct. It was stupid from Ingram, and he's got to learn that he can't be doing that. We need much more defensive discipline than what we've been establishing in the league so far. But as for the Simon Murray one, I felt that a penalty, on the other hand, should have been awarded to Dundee. But unfortunately, we've got one VAR call that was spot on and another one that wasn't.
And it was a tale of two decisions at Celtic Park. Goggsy, what did you think of those calls? Was it West Coast bias or fair enough?
I thought it was fair enough, actually. I think the Hearts decision, I think it struck the Celtic defender's shoulder. So I thought
Did it really though? Because I had a look at that. It didn't look clear cut to me.
It wasn't clear cut, but I think the referee was just right and no more. Like, I think if it was a further inch further down, it would have been an absolute penalty. But like,
is there a case to be made though that if you can't really tell, if it's not really clear cut, you take a step back and you think, look, he's hit it towards him, it's hit off his arm. That's a penalty.
It is and it isn't. Like, it's one of these things where the inconsistency of referees is never going to end. Like, we're consistently inconsistent, and unfortunately, it just goes down to human error. And I hate saying that because, like, one team's been shafted, and like the other team has gone up the other end and got a penalty of their own. So, I mean, we're gonna forever have these sort of discussions between what's right and what's not. Like, the rules are there, but it's always down to the perception of the referee. And
so then what's the point in VAR? Are we just shifting the perception of one official to the other?
Well, what's the point in rules if you have grey areas that can be negotiated in the first place?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess where the frustration of Hearts fans specifically will come is that there is this perception that when you go through to Glasgow and visit a place like Celtic Park or Ibrox, the visiting team don't tend to get the decisions. And honestly, when I got the notification on my phone, I was at Easter Road at the time. It was a VAR check at Celtic Park. I was like, "There's no chance they'll get that."
No.
Yeah. So is that coincidence or is there something in that, Ethan?
For me, there's something in it because it's not oddly specific to them either. I think it happens in England as well. I've seen plenty of games growing up. Alex Ferguson's Man United were never the big boys in town. The same thing would happen. Away teams would never really get anything at Old Trafford. I think it's the same way in Scotland. I've seen us go to Ibrox, Parkhead many times, and some decisions are just absolutely ludicrous. And it's kind of like, an outcome will happen where they'll decide something's a penalty on one end of the park, and you'll never see it repeated on the opposing end ever again, and that's what bugs me. Goggsy talks about inconsistency. Well, I've said there. Well, what's the point of rules if they can negotiate it differently? I think they should try and get rid of these grey areas, give us a clear definition of what it should be allowed and what shouldn't. And I mean, they're maybe taking steps forward now in regards to transparency, but for me, it's not enough. I think they need to do a lot more. I certainly feel that it's a case that when you go to away over there, I think the proof is in the pudding. You're bound to look at there'll be stats available where you can see that teams they get very little over there. I think at one point Rangers had on the cusp of a world record of being a team to go the longest without conceding a penalty kick, and this is at a point in time where shirt pulls are being penalised. Like the most minimal shirt pulls are being deemed as fouls in the box. Things that you see all the time in set pieces. You're gonna have a real tough time convincing me that for that entire period. Not in a single set piece was not a tiny short pull in a skirmish from Rangers defending a corner or a free kick. And again, I don't want to pick on Rangers too hard here specifically. I'm just providing them here as an example. I think the referees certainly do feel intimidated. I mean, Willie Collum had one decision. I don't even recall it too specifically. And Rangers put out a statement absolutely damning him. And that he's now the head of officiating. Rangers were calling for him not to officiate a match with them ever again. Was he an ex-Celtic season ticket holder? I don't know about Celtic, but I think if you want to go down another rabbit hole, I do believe he's of the Catholic religion.
Yeah, he's a Catholic school teacher or something.
Yes.
Yeah, which will rile up all kinds of theories and ideas.
Because then we're talking about perception here, because at the weekend, you had a whole end of Rangers fans singing F the SFA when they didn't get a result. And then you've got, managers like Craig Levein, when he was the Hearts manager, going, no, you've got this thing called the Glasgow Blink. They didn't see decisions. So where does it end? Is there a case for getting in referees from elsewhere? Because the quality isn't actually reflect. I mean, none of them were at the Euros.
Before I start speaking, I must bring up the irony that Willie Collum taught RMP at school as well, so religious and moral education. But no, I mean, the one weekend we had like international referees. I think it must have been 2014-15, and the referee performance of that weekend was much higher than the average in Scottish football. It speaks volumes, but it would cost so much money. Like we always talk about how referees are a part-time gig in Scotland because the SFA can't afford to buy them out of their actual jobs because some referees are teachers, some are lawyers, some are high up in business. But the thing is, it's not worth. I've been a referee myself. The profession is not worth being a full time. There's too much baggage, in my opinion, that would go with it. Had I continued to become maybe a category 4 or category 3 referee, I genuinely my mental health would go through the floor. I genuinely.
Can you give us some examples, Goggsy, that led you to just think this isn't worth it when you were a referee?
My first graded game as a referee, I gave 2 penalties in an under 13s game, and I got death threats from the side from parents.
No.
that was my first ever game. So
what did they say to you?
What coast in the country were you in when this happened?
It was Fife. I was refereeing in Kirkcaldy, and
That's you clamped there, Ethan.
I know.
No, I'll tell a quick anecdote. There's this wee Niaf that was giving me lip, and I brought him my card book, and I said, see this book, any more from you and you're going in it. And his mum on the side said, don't you effing dare, ref. I was in stitches. No, but it gets worse as it goes up as well, because obviously you get more of an audience the higher you go, and like getting death threats from Sunday League.
I guess if you accept that there's always going to be perception in the game in Scotland, because the 2 big clubs, Celtic and Rangers, are that big, that the chances are they're going to be a Celtic or a Rangers fan. I was at the Arbroath. Who were they playing again? It was a few years ago. It was when they went on that charge in the Championship. And I was going for a pint after the game, and I was just chatting to these 2 boys, and Arbroath tops. My pal played for Arbroath. And I was telling him, he was like, he was a Celtic fan, and they were like, oh no, we're Celtic fans as well. We go and travel to Celtic. I was like, well, from Arbroath in the northeast. He's like, I know, we travel all the way down. So you've got Celtic and Rangers fans everywhere, and you do have people that are more inclined one way as well. So the chances are perception is going to play a factor, whether we like it or not. You would have thought that VAR would have counteracted that a little bit, but it seems to have just added to the problems rather than reduced them. But we'll move on to Team of the Week to finish off, guys. Goggsy, you talk us through your back line.
All right, so my back line.
So I really want to hear this. So
I think obviously Mitov had a standout performance on Saturday, despite conceding to Moses Abai late on. But I think at right back I'd go with Nicky Devlin. I think he played quite well in. Motherwell didn't have much joy down the left-hand side, so I thought he would pretty solidly. Centre halves are Carter Vickers and Wright, and left back I've gone with Yefte, the Rangers boy.
Aye. Well, I've got Hefty Jefty at left back as well. I don't think it's easy coming in your debut and playing a solid performance, so fair play to him. I had Big Ackle right as well with that big towering header that he scored. I think he deserved that to keep the clean sheet as well. Shock, I've went for a couple of Hibs players though. I've went for Chris Cadden at right back, just because I think he's had a few injury troubles. He came in on Saturday. I thought he was really solid. Great assist for Boyle for the goal, and he got up and down that line really well. So I gave Chris Cadden the right back, and actually gave the centre half to Ekpiteta, Big Marv, who's had he's had a tough start to the season. He was so poor at Celtic Park when Hibs went over there. He had a nuclear in the first game as well. So I just think with a lot of pressure coming under him, I think to return a decent performance on Saturday, he distributed the ball well. He was pretty solid. So I have went Cadden, Wright, Ekpiteta, and Jefty. What about you, Ethan? Any changes there?
Yeah, so the hardest part of my team was deciding a goalkeeper, because I didn't really see any standouts. Now I'm hearing about Mitov having this great game. I wasn't aware. So I looked at the keepers that have kept the clean sheet, and I can't go with Ross Laidlaw because he was simply just not tested. So I've decided with Kasper Schmeichel. He's now got 5 clean sheets, and he's the first to have gotten 5 clean sheets in his first 5 games in Scottish football. That's not been done since 1906.
Wow.
So breaking a record. He did have some decent saves when called upon to shut Hearts out, and I think the contribution he's had to Celtic as well has been overly positive too. He seems to inspire a better level of confidence than what was there previously. I think his distribution seems to influence much better than it did previously under Joe Hart as well. He just looks like a complete upgrade. So, yeah, I've put him in my in between my sticks. My backline, I mentioned Ryan Leake earlier. I thought he was outstanding alongside Lapata. So I've got them as a centre-half partnership. I mean, like I say, Leake, he came on in the 15th minute, but was outstanding. Lapata, man of the match. Again, honestly, County were maybe a bit spot for choice on who they could have picked, but Lapata won it. He was rock solid, coming out on top. And then for fullbacks, I went for Will Ferry at Dundee United against Rangers. I actually seen him play for Cheltenham last year, and I knew he'd be a good capture, and he seemed to cope very well against the Rangers. Look, good box-to-box, both ends. And that's not an easy game, of course, to show up in, but he seems to have captured the Hearts United fans already, and the same case on Sunday. Then last but not least, certainly not least, shifting him out of position onto right back, I went for Corey Ndaba. I know he's not a right back. I just chucked him in into my back line. Solid defender. His consistency alone could find him in this team most weeks. Killie looked like they were up against it with some. We talked about refereeing calls earlier. Looks like the refereeing in that game was absolutely appalling. And St Mirren are very difficult to play against, so your mainstay in defence need to be up for the challenge. And he wasn't afraid to go forward either. He created some inspiration. He won corners that basically led. The second corner specifically led to the second goal. The first one led, I think, to like a phase of play, which a few ongoing corners to score the first. He was credited with the assist on the first with the BBC. I haven't watched it back. I don't know how they've come to that conclusion. He's not touched the ball at all. But yeah, he makes my
Fair
team.
enough. Appreciate that analysis as well, Ethan. Just to clarify, I said mistakenly said Jeff, it was his debut season is what I meant to say. Goggsy, in modern football, you get various formations. It's not the classic 4-4-2 as a given these days. Can you talk us through your midfield and forward line and what formation you went
for? I've gone for a 4-2-4, but I'll use the wingers as midfielders, just to simplify things. I think the two holding mids with Mark O'Hara had a fantastic game. He loves a goal against Kilmarnock, and he got the penalty. And since he signed for St Mirren, he is one of Robinson's favourite players. You can tell. Robinson tried to sign him on a permanent for Motherwell before getting him on loan, and then permanently signing him. And then obviously when he went to St Mirren, signed Mark O'Hara or one of the other. Anyway, Engels as well, getting his first goal from the spot on his debut. I think he was quite solid. He sort of dictated the game in the middle of the park. And my two wingers are Martin Boyle with his goal. He made Kucherevich look like he'd missed the bus, expecting the pass, but he dinked it over the keeper. And Tom Lawrence as well, just for his goal, because he took it very well.
Nice. Yeah, it's pretty similar. For me, I went 4-3-3, Mark O'Hara and Engels. I think we're going to be a stick on in the team of the week. Engels coming and scoring it. On his, I think it was his league debut at the weekends. Mark O'Hara was really good as well. I've went with Rudy Molotnikov, the young man that played for Hibs, 18-year-old. I just think he's really one to watch. He's a superstar. Him, he's really, really good. The Hibs team's been night and day replacing Josh Campbell with that young man. The way he turns on the ball, distributes it. He's always looking for it, energetic. I thought he was just outstanding on Saturday, and he has been every time he's played, to be fair, especially in that cam role. So I went with him. Front three, I think that finish from Martin Boyle, I think he has to be included. Now, listen, you're going to be accused of bias having four Hibs players in any team of the week, but I had to go because it was such a nice finish. I had to go with Martin Boyle in there. Tom Lawrence as well, great finish. And then Papa Gay, absolute stick on for me as well. He was brilliant. So what about you, Ethan? Any changes there?
Yeah, I've done a 4-3-3 as well. My midfield three, I've got Josh Nisbet. He ran the show against Dundee. Smallest man in the park, but biggest player on the pitch. He's signed from the A-League. He was, I think, one of the best players in that division. So you're initially quite interested to see what he's going to offer because he's only like 5'3". He's or maybe even 5'2". Absolutely tiny, but no, had a heart of a lion. I thought he really impressed me. I've then got a Hibs player as well in the form of Kwon. From what I've seen, he seemed to be a bit of the heart of that long-awaited Hibs victory. And I know he's a quality player, but I think it's a day like that you'll get your credit in the sunlight. And so I think he probably is deserving of his place in my team. Followed by the aforementioned Nielsen at Aberdeen. Again, he seems to be a very good addition. And against Motherwell, it looks like he had an absolute blinder as well. Going into my front three, I've got Martin Boyle as well. Again, class finish to secure the win. Looked just as lively as ever. Papa Gay leading the line. Scored a brace. You can't not have him in there. He's in red-hot form for the Reds. So, again, completely deserving of his place. And then last but not least, even though he only played 45 minutes, I've chosen Junior Hoylett. From what I could see, the first half of the Hibs game didn't look particularly great. The second half, things got a bit more opened up. So maybe you put it down to someone like him raising the level a little bit. It's probably not a coincidence, but he appeared to look, again, not my words, just from what I've...
he was really good. He looked... He
was
just
told shit hot.
Yeah, no, he looks really composed, really assured of himself. It was right where he picked off, right where he left off Aberdeen last season, as far as I'm concerned. It looked really... Yeah, he looked like he fit in really well. Tell you what, for a bottom six club, we got some mentions today. Hibs, did we know? Team of the week. That was 7 or 8 shouts we got there.
And I'll give an honourable mention for Ross Dockett at United as well. United fans should not get used to me praising their players, but he came on the 34th minute for Kevin Holt, and it looked to be that with his ability to kind of just hold on to the ball in tight situations, tight scenarios, it elevated United to get much healthier and attack more. And again, in midfield against a team like Rangers, that it's never going to be easy. It's a very difficult task, and his influence had a good positive effect on United again, who on another day maybe could have gotten a result. So an honourable mention for him, and yeah, I would say one for Mark O'Hara as well.
Nice one. Well, listen, we're getting to the levels of a feature-like film here, guys. So we'll wrap it up. Just on a last note, Premiership club Celtic obviously start Scottish teams in Europe this week. Just a note on that, Goggsy. What do you make of their chances this week?
I think, well, over the course of their 8 games, I think they've got quite favourable fixtures. I think Rangers have a much more difficult task in the Europa League, funnily enough. But, Slovan Bratislava is, I'd say, probably the most favourable game you could get at home to start with. And, I mean, the last time Celtic played a team from Bratislava, they got knocked out in the Champions League qualifiers by Armedia 5-4 on aggregate. I mean, they lost 5-0 in Slovakia and then winning 4-0 at home in the return leg. But I do think they should be able to sail through maybe 2 or 3-1. I think Slovan Bratislava do have a couple of good physical players, but I don't think they've got enough to challenge Celtic.
What about you, Ethan? Do you think what do you make of their chances for this Champions League campaign? Do you think they could get through?
I don't think they'll get through. I think they're notoriously, when it comes to European football, they can never seem to get over that final hurdle to get into the knockout stages. I don't think that will change this time. I think the fixtures line up pretty well. And I agree with Goggsy. I think the Bratislava game is probably the most likely one they're going to win, but you got to remember, look, it's completely different ballpark in Europe. Whilst we talk about Celtic having the strengths, especially when they play at home, these teams are coming over and they're wanting to show what they can do. I think they're excited at the prospect of playing that parquet. They're excited at taking on teams like Celtic too. It's easy to go off club profile, but you got to remember it's only a few years ago they were getting knocked out by the likes of Cluj. So you can never really rule anyone out in the Champions League. Not that I want to rule Celtic out entirely, but from what I think, the level of standard of these Champions League teams, I would be surprised if Celtic went through.
Well, I'm sure we'll have an episode dedicated to the European football scene as well. But thank you very much, team, and thanks for our listeners for tuning in today, and take care.
A late amendment to the pod. Last but not least, the Killie game. I've watched the highlights on this, and honestly, I'm absolutely shocked by what I've seen. Matthew McDermott, the referee, he's stolen the spotlight for himself. There's a handful of decisions in this game where you're just left absolutely mind-boggled. I mean, to begin with, you've got Sean Rooney. He boots Kyle Vassell not once, but twice while he's on the deck. and I believe Andrew Dallas was on VAR, and they decided to go provide no further action with this. So Sean Rooney's had a free pass to boot a player on the deck, consecutively. And then later on in the game, Sean Rooney then has a slight push in his midriff from, I think it was Joe Wright that got the red card. And as soon as they go to VAR with that, it's a straight red. It's absolutely appalling standard of officiating. You compare the two, you can watch them slow motion, you can watch them side by side. One is clearly worse than the other. And it's absolutely appalling. Like I said, the standard of officiating, Kilmarnock have absolutely been done. And they've done very well to show resilience and get the point with 10 men. But I think they'll rightfully be feeling very sour at the idea that they didn't collect all 3 points due to decisions like that. There's also the penalty call as well. Now, for me, you talk about the handball rule. I don't think it should be a penalty. I think it's in such close proximity that, realistically, you can't do anything about it. I made my feelings on this very well known last season through Dens Park Wire. We had a penalty conceded against Hearts in a similar fashion, and a penalty conceded against Motherwell in a similar fashion, where if it's beat off your hand, a foot away, and you can't get with away, I don't see how you can be penalised for that. And I mean, you look at Parkhead against Hearts, a very similar instance where I think it was Liam Scales, the ball hit his hand, but it was deemed that it was in such close proximity that they couldn't allow it to be a penalty. That was a header going towards goal. Now, in this case, you've got a strike towards goal. It's a similar instance in that regard, but they've decided that that's going to be a penalty. And we'll say it forever. I think that it's forever consistently inconsistent. It's just absolute madness, absolutely insane. There's no. My problem is it feels like there's a grey area that they can negotiate and exploit. I can't understand how you can verify one to be an illegal move and the other one to be somehow absolved when the nature of which is exactly the same. It makes no sense to me. Then there's the case of Mikel Mandron as well. Mikel Mandron got a yellow card, I think, for an initial elbow to the face. It was possibly Joe Wright again. And then he's just been booked. He's then went in for a late, reckless challenge. Just to add to Kilmarnock's frustrations, you see, again, you compare Joe Wright getting sent off for a push in Rooney's midriff, whilst Rooney avoided getting sent off with the double boot to Vassell. Now you've got Mandron already on a yellow. He's committed a second offence, and it should be a second yellow. He should be off. So it's taken the piss. It's completely taken the piss from a Kilmarnock perspective. That again, you compare all the incidents together, it's just absolutely criminal that Killie have somehow been punished for much, much less. And St Mirren really got away with one. And I don't like to go on about this too much, because the reality is, although I'm pointing the finger at Sean Rooney, saying he's lucky that he's gotten away with one, and I'm pointing the finger at Mandron to say he's lucky to be on the pitch as well, there's still parts of St Mirren that I think do deserve a bit of praise. I want to give some attention to Olasanya up front. Scored again. He's currently on track to having his best ever goal scoring season, and I'm aware that when he first arrived at the club, he was actually deemed to be a bit of a joke figure, and now he's completely turned that around. He's a hero in those parts of Paisley now, and not only, if you just look at the goal scoring record, it's not just that's improving. I think his overall game, I think the way that he leads the line has a very healthy and positive influence on St Mirren. But as well as this, you need to look at the teams he's scoring against as well. Because it's not as if he's scoring in games that you'd expect him to. He's scoring against high-level opposition. He's scoring against Aberdeen. He scored against Kilmarnock, who were 4th place last season. He scored against Dundee. He scored in both of their European ties. So he's a player that's really coming into the mould, a masterstroke from Robinson, if you will. He could very well end up being one that could be prized away in the summer for a big money fee. I could genuinely see that. He's such a pest. Gives defenders even no peace whatsoever. And on top of that, like I say, he then has the numbers to follow it through, or at least thus far he does. So no, very, very positive influence in the team, and in great form in that regard too. There's a lot to like about St Mirren, but if we're going to review this game, then yeah, the headline is always going to be on Matthew McDermott and Andrew Dallas. Absolutely pathetic from them. And now we know, off the back of that St Johnstone result, Craig Levein's time at St Johnstone is now over. He has been sacked. And if you look at that appointment at face value, he was initially brought in to steady the ship and keep them in the division.
he did that. So we can very much argue that Craig Levein was an initial success. I thought they were going to be doomed at the very least to be in the playoffs last season, but Ross County managed to get caught in that trap instead with Don Killie, and of course they did very well to stay in the division against Wraith Rovers. I felt towards the end of last season, Ross County were better than St Johnstone, so I think Levein has actually done a great job in that sense alone. Of course, going into this season, had you made a list of the managers most likely to get sacked, he would have been right up there. I believe, it looks like eye-bleeding stuff for St Johnstone. Levein did have a couple of picks, though. Maybe not popular names right now, given the recent suspensions, but, the two guys up front, Sabide and Kimpioka, on just a football level, in terms of their ability, they've been great finds. Sabide, I think you type his name up onto Google News, type any English team's name next to him, and he's linked with absolutely everyone. Sabide, obviously, I think he's more the goal scorer, and Kimpioka, from what I've seen, if I were to compare the two, I would suggest Kimpioka actually has more ability. Either way, I think they can complement each other so well when they do get the chance to play together. I don't know how often they've had that. I just know I've seen that in the flesh at least once or twice last season. So, Levein moves on. It's an interesting one now to see where St Johnstone will look, because there was a tweet from Eric Nicholson, who works for the Courier, and he was speaking to Craig Levein earlier this afternoon, round about maybe 1 o'clock, and Craig Levein, I think, closer to 3 or 4, it's been announced that he's left the club. Nicholson was speaking to him about St Johnstone going forward, some of the plans for the first team. So I think Levein was completely unaware for his fate shortly afterwards. So now you look at it, two different stories. What's next for Craig Levein? You would like to think that he's maybe restored his stock a little bit, having been out of management for a while, going to Brecon City, helping them with their setup. He could very well end up going back again. But however, Andy Kirk notably has been left behind. Andy Kirk could very well now be in the frame for the manager's job. I think that was maybe the idea to begin with, that Levein will take the reins to steady the ship, and they'll slowly mould Andy Kirk into the first team head coach. That was maybe the plan from the start. We'll shortly see. In terms of where St Johnstone look next, if not Kirk, I mean, there's certainly some interesting names. The name I first thought of immediately, to be honest, maybe a bit left field, just Gary Bowyer. Of course, I can say that, say that being a Dundee fan, I was surprised that, I still am surprised that Gary Bowyer's went this long without a job. I kind of felt after winning the championship with Dundee, albeit completely expected, I thought someone else would take a chance on him up here. I think that nowadays, the most positive thing a team can do is look for a complete breath of fresh air. And Bowyer was certainly that with Dundee. He picked up, broken fragments of the fan base after the whole Mark McGee spell, and like I say, led us back into the Premiership. Now, don't get me wrong, he had his problems, and I can evaluate that perhaps a different time. But he lived in St Andrews, I believe, whilst managing Dundee. When the St Johnstone job last opened up, that was the first name to my head. I thought they were maybe going to go for Bowyer. They didn't. That door's opened again. I know he's been staying down south. He's, again, as mentioned earlier, he's not managed anyone since winning the league with Dundee. I think it would be a very intriguing appointment if they decide to go that way. I back Gary Bowyer to be a success. Not that he's linked or anything, just as I say, it's just kind of the first name that comes to my mind. I know others will tip the likes of Rhys McCabe, but I would be surprised if Rhys McCabe decided to leave Airdrie. He's got a real good thing going over there. And St Johnstone's a completely different kind of job. St Johnstone are needing someone. Again, McCabe would have positives to being appointed, because I think St Johnstone very well may want to try something different. But they look like they could be in a situation where they just need experience and a steady pair of hands to keep the boat from rocking much further, rather than going for something new and experimental. I think you give that kind of experimental appointment a go, it's got to be with the summer window, with the pre-season. Interesting to see where they'll go, and that's kind of what I mean with the breath of fresh air. If you can get to the summer and bring in someone, we'll say a foreign influence, I suppose, someone different to Scottish football, that you don't really know what to expect. I mean, you look at Aberdeen, they went that way with Jimmy Thielen, and they'll be Thielen fucking great right now. They've won 10 games in a row. That was my case with Dundee when, after Mark McGee depart the club. That's what we got with Gary Bowyer, someone completely new. Left field, there's more examples I could name. But look, if we're going to be honest, though, there's times where it doesn't work out. You've seen that, I think, with Hibs, the likes of Nick Montgomery, the likes of Lee Johnson. Whether you can argue the likes of Montgomery got enough time or not, that's up in the air. Just my feeling on the case is, just as I've previously said, trying something new is never a bad thing. But is it the appropriate time to go down the inexperienced route? I know McCabe's been in a manager for a wee while now. Plays some really pretty stuff. Got a phenomenal cup record with Airdrie if you inspect that a bit closer. Got them into the knockout stage of the League Cup this season and last season. Last season they did a clean sweep of their group stage. They actually beat Dundee on the way of doing that. Premiership Dundee under Tony Dock. I think they were newly promoted into the Championship at that point. They won the Challenge Cup last season, and on the first attempt, Rhys McCabe got them the furthest they've been in the Scottish Cup in about 10 years, I believe, when they played Hearts. So there's a lot to like about Airdrie, a lot to like about Rhys McCabe. He's just one name that I've seen tipped for the St Johnstone job, but I don't want to repeat myself too much. I'm not sure if this would be the right time for that kind of appointment. Perhaps to touch on where Craig Levein goes next, just one more time, I would then maybe suggest that, Scottish football has never really had that kind of Sam Allardyce figure when the teams are struggling. They need someone in to come save the day. There's been several attempts. I think John Hughes looked to try and take that mantle. It didn't really work out so well. He got Raith Rovers relegated from the Championship. He did manage to keep Ross County up in the Premiership, only to follow up with a disastrous relegation with Dunfermline once again in the Championship. Jim McIntyre, when he came to Dundee after Ross County, came in with the sole purpose of keeping Dundee up. Of course, it didn't end up like that. You can say the same with Mark McGee. So there's been several guys that I think have tried to be viewed as that sort of type. But it just doesn't seem to really exist right now in Scottish football. So Craig Levein having come back in, and of course he's got a wealth of experience behind him, being the fact that he's managed at the international level, and that he did, used to manage Dundee United and had a great United side at that point. It was essentially the foundations of his team that went on to win the Scottish Cup and a third place finish under Peter Houston back in 2010. How he done at Hearts, you'll probably get mixed reviews, but the point is he knows the Premiership really very well. And I was surprised, I'll be honest, I was surprised that he managed to keep St Johnstone up. I kind of thought St Johnstone looked doomed from the start of last season under Stephen McLean. And he did just enough not only to keep them up, but as I say, to avoid the playoffs, when I certainly felt they were the worst side between them and Ross County. So maybe Craig Levein, it'd be disappointing for him, obviously, to lose his job, especially as he was trying to look to kick on and build something at the club. But maybe that is the door that we can look at for him next. The next time there's going to be an opening in the Premiership, a team perhaps looking in a bit of trouble, he might be the first name touted, and we may very well have that kind of Sam Allardyce, Steve Bruce figure in the Scottish Premiership, as we've been waiting for so long and yet to see.